Book 8. When Turnus had assembled all his powers, his standard planted on Laurentum's towers, when now the sprightly trumpet, from afar, had given the signal of approaching war, had roused the neighing steeds to scour the fields, while the fierce riders clattered on their shields. Trembling with rage, the Latian youth prepared to join the allies, and headlong rushed to war. Fierce Euphons and Messapus led the crowd, with bold Mezentius, who blasphemed aloud. These through the country took their wasteful course, the fields to forage, and to gather force. Then Venulus to Diomed they send, to beg his aid Ausonia to defend, declare the common danger, and inform the Grecian leader of the growing storm. Aeneas landed on the Latian coast, with banished gods, and with a baffled host, yet now aspired to conquest of the state, and claimed a title from the gods and fate. What numerous nations in his quarrel came, and how they spread his formidable name. What he designed, what mischief might arise, if fortune favoured his first enterprise, was left for him to weigh, whose equal fears and common interest was involved in theirs. While Turnus and the allies thus urge the war, the Trojan, floating in a flood of care, beholds the tempest which his foes prepare. This way and that he turns his anxious mind, thinks and rejects the counsels he designed, explores himself in vain in every part, and gives no rest to his distracted heart. So, when the sun by day, or moon by night, strike on the polished brass their trembling light, the glittering species here and there divide, and cast their dubious beams from side to side. Now on the walls, now on the pavement play, and to the ceiling flash the glaring day. It was night, and weary nature lulled asleep the birds of air, and fishes of the deep, and beasts, and mortal men. The Trojan chief was laid on Tiber's banks, oppressed with grief, and found in silent slumber late relief. Then through the shadows of the poplar wood arose the father of the Roman flood. An azure robe was over his body spread, a wreath of shady reeds adorned his head. Thus, manifest to sight, the god appeared, and with these pleasing words his sorrow cheered. Undoubted offspring of ethereal race, O long expected in this promised place, who through the foes hast borne thy banished gods, restored them to their hearths, and old abodes, this is thy happy home, the clime where fate ordains thee to restore the Trojan state. Fear not, the war shall end in lasting peace, and all the rage of haughty Juno cease. And this nightly vision may not seem the effect of fancy, or an idle dream. A sow beneath an oak shall lie along, all white herself, and white her 30 young. When 30 rolling years have run their race, thy son Ascanius, on this empty space, shall build a royal town, of lasting fame, which from this omen shall receive the name. Time shall approve the truth, for what remains, and how with sure success to crown thy pains, with patience next attend. A banished band, driven with Evander from the Arcadian land, have planted here, and placed on high their walls, their town the founder Pallanteum calls, derived from Pallas, his great-grandsire's name. But the fierce Latians old possession claim, with war infesting the new colony. These make thy friends, and on their aid rely. To thy free passage I submit my streams. Wake, son of Venus, from thy pleasing dreams, and when the setting stars are lost in day, to Juno's power thy just devotion pay, with sacrifice the wrathful queen appease, her pride at length shall fall, her fury cease. When thou returnest victorious from the war, perform thy vows to me with grateful care. The god am I, whose yellow water flows around these fields and fattens as it goes. Tiber my name, among the rolling floods renowned on earth, esteemed among the gods. This is my certain seat. In times to come my waves shall wash the walls of mighty Rome, he said, and plunged below. While yet he spoke, his dream Aeneas and his sleep forsook. He rose, and looking up, beheld the skies with purple blushing, and the day arise. Then water in his hollow palm he took from Tiber's flood, and thus the powers bespoke. Laurentian nymphs, by whom the streams are fed, and Father Tiber, in thy sacred bed receive Aeneas, and from danger keep. Whatever fount, whatever holy deep, conceals thy watery stores wherever they rise, and, bubbling from below, salute the skies. Thou, king of horned floods, whose plenteous urn suffices fatness to the fruitful corn, for this thy kind compassion of our woes, shalt share my morning song and evening vows. But O be present to thy people's aid, and firm the gracious promise thou hast made. Thus having said, 2 galleys from his stores, with care he chooses, mans, and fits with oars. Now on the shore the fatal swine is found, wondrous to tell, she lay along the ground, her well-fed offspring at her udders hung, she white herself, and white her 30 young. Aeneas takes the mother and her brood, and all on Juno's altar are bestowed. The following night and the succeeding day propitious Tiber smoothed his watery way, he rolled his river back and poised he stood, a gentle swelling and a peaceful flood. The Trojans mount their ships, they put from shore, borne on the waves, and scarcely dip an oar. Shouts from the land give omen to their course, and the pitched vessels glide with easy force. The woods and waters wonder at the gleam of shields, and painted ships that stem the stream. One summer's night and one whole day, they pass betwixt the greenwood shades, and cut the liquid glass. The fiery sun had finished half his race, looked back and doubted in the middle space, when they from far beheld the rising towers, the tops of sheds and shepherds, lowly bowers, thin as they stood, which, then, of homely clay, now rise in marble, from the Roman sway. These cots, Evander's kingdom mean and poor, the Trojan saw, and turned his ships to shore. It was on a solemn day, the Arcadian states, the king and prince, without the city gates, then paid their offerings in a sacred grove to Hercules, the warrior son of Jove. Thick clouds of rolling smoke involved the skies, and fat of entrails on his altar fries. But, when they saw the ships that stemmed the flood, and glittered through the covert of the wood, they rose with fear, and left the unfinished feast, till dauntless Pallas reassured the rest to pay the rites. Himself without delay a javelin seized, and singly took his way, then gained a rising ground, and called from far, "Resolve me, strangers, whence and what you are, your business here, and bring you peace or war." High on the stern Aeneas his stand, and held a branch of olive in his hand, while thus he spoke. "The Phrygians, arms you see, expelled from Troy, provoked in Italy by Latian foes, with war unjustly made, at first affianced and at last this message bear, the Trojans and their chief bring holy peace, and beg the king's relief." Struck with so great a name, and all on fire, the youth replies, "Whatever you require, your fame exacts. Upon our shores descend, a welcome guest, and what you wish, a friend," he said, and, downward, hasting to the strand, embraced the stranger prince, and joined his hand. Conducted to the grove, Aeneas broke the silence first, and thus the king bespoke. "Best of the Greeks, to whom by fate's command I bear these peaceful branches in my hand, undaunted I approach you, though I know your birth is Grecian, and your land my foe. From Atreus though your ancient lineage came, and both the brother kings your kindred claim, yet my self-conscious worth, your high renown, your virtue, through the neighbouring nations blown, our fathers' mingled blood, Apollo's voice, have led me hither, less by need than choice. Our founder Dardanus, as fame has sung, and Greeks acknowledge, from Electra sprung. Electra from the loins of Atlas came, Atlas, whose head sustains the starry frame. Your sire is Mercury, whom long before on cold Cylene's top fair Maia bore. Maia the fair, on fame if we rely, was Atlas, daughter, who sustains the sky. Thus from one common source our streams divide, ours is the Trojan, yours the Aeneadian side. Raised by these hopes, I sent no news before, nor asked your leave, nor did your faith implore, but come, without a pledge, my own ambassador. The same Rutulians, who with arms pursue the Trojan race, are equal foes to you. Our host expelled, What farther force can stay the victor troops from universal sway? Then will they stretch their power athwart the land, and either sea from side to side command. Receive our offered faith and give us thine. Ours is a generous and experienced line. We want not hearts nor bodies for the war. In council cautious, and in fields we dare. He said, and while spoke with piercing eyes, Evander viewed the man with vast surprise, pleased with his action, ravished with his face. Then answered briefly with a royal grace. O valiant leader of the Trojan line, in whom the features of thy father shine, how I recall Anchises! How I see his motions, mien, and all my friend, in thee! Long though it be, it is fresh within my mind, when Priam to his sister's court designed a welcome visit, with a friendly stay, and through the Arcadian kingdom took his way. Then, past a boy, the callow down began to shade my chin, and call me first a man. I saw the shining train with vast delight, and Priam's goodly person pleased my sight. But great Anchises, far above the rest, with awful wonder fired my youthful breast. I long to join in friendship's holy bands our mutual hearts, and plight our mutual hands. I first accosted him, I sued, I sought, and with a loving force to Phineus brought. He gave me, when at length constrained to go, a Lycian quiver and a Gnossian bow, a vest embroidered, glorious to behold, and 2 rich bridles, with their bits of gold, which my son's coursers in obedience hold. The league you ask, I offer as your right, and when tomorrow's sun reveals the light, with swift supplies you shall be sent away. Now celebrate with us this solemn day, whose holy rites admit no long delay. Honor our annual feast, and take your seat, with friendly welcome, at a homely treat. Thus having said, the bowls, removed for fear, the youths replaced, and soon restored the cheer. On sods of turf, he set the soldiers round. A maple throne, raised higher from the ground, received the Trojan chief. And over the bed, a lion's shaggy hide for ornament they spread. The loaves were served in canisters, the wine in bowls. The priest renewed the rites divine. Broiled entrails are their food, and beef's continued chine. But when the rage of hunger was repressed, thus spoke Evander to his royal guest. These rites, these altars, and this feast, O king, from no vain fears or superstition spring, or blind devotion, or from blinder chance or heady zeal or brutal ignorance. But, saved from danger, with a grateful sense, the labours of a god we recompense. See from afar, yon rock that mates the sky, about whose feet such heaps of rubbish lie, such indigested ruin, bleak and bare, how desert now it stands, exposed in air. It was once a robber's den, enclosed around with living stone, and deep beneath the ground. The monster Cacus, more than half a beast, this hold, impervious to the sun, possessed. The pavement, ever foul with human gore, heads, and their mangled members, hung the door. Vulcan this plague begot, and, like his sire, black clouds he belched, and flakes of livid fire. Time, long expected, eased us of our load, and brought the needful presence of a god. The avenging force of Hercules, from Spain, arrived in triumph, from Geryon slain. Thrice lived the giant, and thrice lived in vain. His prize, the lowing herds, Alcides drove near Tiber's bank, to graze the shady grove. Allured with hope of plunder, and intent by force to rob, by fraud to circumvent, the brutal Cacus, as by chance they strayed, 4 oxen thence, and 4 fair kine conveyed, and lest the printed footsteps might be seen, he dragged them backwards to his rocky den. The tracks of verse a lying notice gave, and led the searcher backward from the cave. Meantime, the herdsman hero shifts his place, to find fresh pasture, and untrodden grass. The beasts, who missed their mates, filled all around with bellowings, and the rocks restored the sound. One heifer, who had heard her love complain, roared from the cave, and made the project vain. Alcides found the fraud. With rage he shook, and tossed about his head his knotted oak. Swift as the winds, or Scythian arrows, flight he clomb, with eager haste, the aerial height. Then first we saw the monster mend his pace, fear his eyes and paleness in his face, confessed the god's approach. Trembling he springs, as terror had increased his feet with wings, nor stayed for stairs, but down the depth he threw his body, on his back, the door he drew, the door, a rib of living rock. With pains his father hewed it out, and bound with iron chains. He broke the heavy links, the mountain closed, and bars and levers to his foe opposed. The wretch had hardly made his dungeon fast. The fierce avenger came with bounding haste, surveyed the mouth of the forbidden hold, and here and there his raging eyes he rolled. He gnashed his teeth, and thrice he compassed round with winged speed the circuit of the ground. Thrice at the cavern's mouth he pulled in vain, and, panting, thrice desisted from his pain. A pointed flinty rock, all bare and black, grew gibbous from behind the mountain's back. Owls, ravens, all ill omens of the night, here built their nests, and hither winged their flight. The leaning head hung threatening over the flood, and nodded to the left. The hero stood adverse, with planted feet, and, from the right, tugged at the solid stone with all his might. Thus heaved, the fixed foundations of the rock gave way. Heaven echoed at the rattling shock. Tumbling, it choked the flood. On either side the banks leap backward, and the streams divide. The sky shrunk upward with unusual dread, and trembling Tiber dived beneath his bed. The court of Cacus stands revealed to sight. The cavern glares, with new admitted light. So the pent vapours, with a rumbling sound, heave from below, and rend the hollow ground. A sounding floor succeeds, and from on high, the gods with hate beheld the nether sky. The ghosts repine at violated night, and curse the invading sun, and sicken at the sight. The graceless monster, caught in open day, enclosed, and in despair, to fly away, howls horrible from underneath, and fills his hollow palace with unmanly yells. The hero stands above, and from afar plies him with darts and stones, and distant war. He, from his nostrils' huge mouth, expires black clouds of smoke, amidst his father's fires, gathering, with each repeated blast, the night, to make uncertain aim, and erring sight. The wrathful god then plunges from above, and where in thickest waves the sparkles drove, there lights, and wades through fumes, and gropes his way, half singed, half stifled, till he grasps his prey. The monster, spewing fruitless flames, he found. He squeezed his throat, he writhed his neck around, and in a knot his crippled members bound. Then from their sockets tore his burning eyes. Rolled on a heap, the breathless robber lies. The doors, unbarred, receive the rushing day, and thorough lights disclose the ravished prey. The bulls, redeemed, breathe open air again. Next, by the feet, they drag him from his den. The wondering neighborhood, with glad surprise, behold his shagged breast, his giant size, his mouth that flames no more, and his extinguished eyes. From that auspicious day, with rites divine, we worship at the hero's holy shrine. Petitius first ordained these annual vows. As priests were added the Pinarian house, who raised this altar in the sacred shade, where honours, ever due, for ever shall be paid. For these deserts and this high virtue shown, ye warlike youths, your heads with garlands crown, fill high the goblets with a sparkling flood, and with deep draughts, invoke our common God. This said, a double wreath Evander twined, and poplars black and white his temples bind. Then brims his ample bowl. With like design the rest invoke the gods, with sprinkled wine. Meantime the sun descended from the skies, and the bright evening star began to rise. And now the priests, Petitius at their head, in skins of beasts involved, the long procession led, held high the flaming tapers in their hands, as custom had prescribed their holy bands. Then with a second course the tables load, and with full chargers offer to the god. The Celii sing, and cense his altars round with Sabine smoke, their heads with poplar bound, one choir of old, another of the young, to dance, and bear the burthen of the song. The lay records the labours, and the praise, and all the immortal acts of Hercules. First, how the mighty babe, when swathed in bands, the serpent strangled with his infant hands, Then, as in years and matchless force he grew, the Achaean walls and Trojan overthrew. Besides, 1,000 hazards they relate, procured by Juno's and Eurystheus' hate. Thy hands, unconquered hero, could subdue the cloud-born centaurs and the monster crew. Nor thy resistless arm the bull withstood, nor he, the roaring terror of the wood. The triple porter of the Stygian seat, with lolling tongue, lay fawning at thy feet, and, seized with fear, forgot his mangled meat. The infernal waters trembled at thy sight. Thee, God, no face of danger could affright, not huge Typhoeus, nor the unnumbered snake, increased with hissing heads, in Lerna's lake. Hail, Jove's undoubted son, an added grace to heaven, and the great author of thy race. Receive the grateful offerings which we pay, and smile propitious on thy solemn day. In numbers thus they sung. Above the rest, the den and death of Cacus crown the feast. The woods to hollow vales convey the sound, the vales to hills, and hills the notes rebound. The rites performed, the cheerful train retire. Betwixt young Pallas and his aged sire, the Trojan passed, the city to survey, and pleasing talk beguiled the tedious way. The stranger cast around his curious eyes, new objects viewing still, with new surprise, with greedy joy inquires of various things, and acts and monuments of ancient kings. Then thus the founder of the Roman towers: these woods were first the seat of sylvan powers, of nymphs and fauns, and salvage men, who took their birth from trunks of trees and stubborn oak. Nor laws they knew, nor manners, nor the care of labouring oxen, or the shining share, nor arts of gain, nor what they gained to spare. Their exercise the chase, the running flood, supplied their thirst, the trees supplied their food. Then Saturn came, who fled the power of Jove, robbed of his realms and banished from above. The men, dispersed on hills, to towns he brought, and laws ordained, and civil customs taught, and Latium called the land where safe he lay from his unduteous son, and his usurping sway. With his mild empire, peace and plenty came, and hence the golden times derived their name. A more degenerate and discoloured age succeeded this, with avarice and rage. The Ausonians then, and bold Sicanians came, and Saturn's empire often changed the name. Then kings, gigantic Tibris, and the rest with arbitrary sway the land oppressed, for Tiber's flood was Albula before, till from the tyrant's fate his name it bore. I last arrived, driven from my native home by fortune's power, and fate's resistless doom. Long tossed on seas I sought this happy land, warned by my mother nymph, and called by heaven's command. Thus walking on he spoke, and showed the gate, since called Carmental by the Roman state, where stood an altar, sacred to the name of old Carmenta, the prophetic dame, who to her son foretold the Aenean race, sublime in fame, and Rome's imperial place. Then shows the forest, which in aftertimes fierce Romulus for perpetrated crimes a sacred refuge made. With this, the shrine where Pan below the rock had rites divine, then tells of Argus, death, his murdered guest, whose grave and tomb his innocence attest. Thence, to the steep Tarpeian rock he leads, now roofed with gold, then thatched with homely reeds. A reverent fear, such superstition reigns among the rude, even then possessed the swains. Some god they knew, what god they could not tell, did there amidst the sacred horror dwell. The Arcadians thought him Jove, and said they saw the mighty thunderer with majestic awe, who took his shield and dealt his bolts around, and scattered tempests on the teeming ground. Then saw two heaps of ruins. Once they stood two stately towns, on either side the flood, Saturnia's and Janicula's remains, and either place the founder's name retains. Discoursing thus together, they resort where poor Evander kept his country court. They viewed the ground of Rome's litigious hall, once oxen load, where now the lawyers bawl winking face. Then stooping through the narrow gate they pressed, when thus the king bespoke his Trojan guest. Mean as it is, this palace and this door received Alcides, then a conqueror. Dare to be poor, accept our homely food which feasted him, and emulate a god. Then underneath a lowly roof, he led the weary prince, and laid him on a bed, the stuffing leaves, with hides of bears overspread. Now night had shed her silver dews around, and with her sable wings embraced the ground, when love's fair goddess, anxious for her son, new tumults rising, and new wars begun, couched with her husband in his golden bed, with these alluring words invokes his aid. And that her pleasing speech his mind may move, inspires each accent with the charms of love. While cruel fate conspired with Grecian powers, to level with the ground the Trojan towers, I asked not aid the unhappy to restore, nor did the succour of thy skill implore. Nor urged the labours of my lord in vain, a sinking empire longer to sustain, though much I owed to Priam's house, and more the dangers of Aeneas did deplore. But now by Jove's command, and fate's decree, his race is doomed to reign in Italy. With humble suit I beg thy needful art, O still propitious power that rules my heart. A mother kneels a suppliant for her son. By Thetis and Aurora thou wert won to forge impenetrable shields, and grace with fated arms a less illustrious race. Behold what haughty nations are combined against the relics of the Phrygian kind, with fire and sword my people to destroy, and conquer Venus twice, in conquering Troy, she said, and straight her arms, of snowy hue, about her unresolving husband threw. Her soft embraces soon infuse desire, his bones and marrow sudden warmth inspire, and all the godhead feels the wonted fire. Not half so swift the rattling thunder flies, or forky lightnings flash along the skies. The goddess, proud of her successful wiles, and conscious of her form, in secret smiles. Then thus the power, obnoxious to her charms, panting and half dissolving in her arms. Why seek you reasons for a cause so just, or your own beauties, or my love distrust? Long since, had you required my helpful hand, the artificer and art you might command, to labour arms for Troy, nor Jove nor fate confine their empire to so short a date. And, if you now desire new wars to wage, my skill I promise, and my pains engage. Whatever melting metals can conspire, or breathing bellows, or the forming fire, is freely yours. Your anxious fears remove, and think no task is difficult to love. Trembling he spoke, and eager of her charms, he snatched the willing goddess to his arms, till in her lap infused, he lay possessed of full desire, and sunk to pleasing rest. Now when the night her middle race had rode, and his first slumber had refreshed the god, the time when early housewives leave the bed, when living embers on the hearth they spread, supply the lamp and call the maids to rise, with yawning mouths, and with half-opened eyes, they ply the distaff by the winking light, and to their daily labour add the night. Thus frugally they earn their children's bread, and uncorrupted keep the nuptial bed, not less concerned, nor at a later hour, rose from his downy couch the forging power. Sacred to Vulcan's name, an isle there lay, betwixt Sicilia's coasts and Lipare, raised high on smoking rocks, and deep below in hollow caves the fires of Aetna glow. The Cyclops here their heavy hammers deal, loud strokes and hissings of tormented steel are heard around. The boiling waters roar and smoky flames through fuming tunnels soar. Hether the father of the fire, by night, through the brown air precipitates his flight. On their eternal anvils here he found the brethren beating, and the blows go round. A load of pointless thunder now there lies before their hands, to ripen for the skies. These darts for angry Jove, they daily cast, consumed on mortals with prodigious waste. 3 rays of writhen rain, of fire 3 more, of winged southern winds and cloudy store as many parts, the dreadful mixture frame, and fears are added, and avenging flame. Inferior ministers, for Mars, repair his broken axletrees and blunted war, and send him forth again with furbished arms, to wake the lazy war with trumpets, loud alarms. The rest refresh the scaly snakes that fold the shield of Pallas, and renew their gold. Full on the crest the Gorgon's head they place, with eyes that roll in death, and with distorted face. My sons, said Vulcan, set your tasks aside. Your strength and master skill must now be tried. Arms for a hero forge, arms that require your force, your speed, and all your forming fire, he said. They set their former work aside, and their new toils with eager haste divide. A flood of molten silver, brass and gold, and deadly steel, in the large furnace rolled. Of this, their artful hands a shield prepare, alone sufficient to sustain the war. 7 orbs within a spacious round they close, one stirs the fire, and one the bellows blows. The hissing steel is in the smithy drowned, the grot with beaten anvils groans around. By turns their arms advance, in equal time. By turns their hands descend, and hammers chime. They turn the glowing mass with crooked tongs. The fiery work proceeds with rustic songs, while at the Lemnian god's command, they urge their labours thus, and ply the Aeolian forge. The cheerful morn salutes Evander's eyes, and songs of chirping birds invite to rise. He leaves his lowly bed, his buskins meet above his ankles, sandals sheathe his feet. He sets his trusty sword upon his side, and over his shoulder throws a panther's hide. 2 menial dogs before their master pressed. Thus clad, and guarded thus, he seeks his kingly guest. Mindful of promised aid, he mends his pace, but meets Aeneas in the middle space. Young Pallas did his father's steps attend, and true Achates waited on his friend. They join their hands, a secret seat they choose. The Arcadian first their former talk renews. Undaunted prince, I never can believe the Trojan Empire lost, while you survive. Command the assistance of a faithful friend, but feeble are the succours I can send. Our narrow kingdom here the Tiber bounds, that other side the Latian state surrounds, insults our walls and wastes our fruitful grounds. But mighty nations I prepare, to join their arms with yours, and aid your just design. You come, as by your better genius sent, and fortune seems to favour your intent. Not far from hence there stands a hilly town, of ancient building, and of high renown, torn from the Tuscans by the Lydian race, who gave the name of Caere to the place, once Agellina called. It flourished long, in pride of wealth, and warlike people strong, till cursed Mezentius, in a fatal hour, assumed the crown, with arbitrary power. What words can paint those execrable times, the subjects' sufferings, and the tyrant's crimes? That blood, those murthers, O ye gods, replace on his own head, and on his impious race. The living and the dead at his command were coupled, face to face, and hand to hand, till, choked with stench, in loathed embraces tied, the lingering wretches pined away and died. Thus plunged in ills, and meditating more, the people's patience, tired, no longer bore the raging monster, but with arms beset his house, and vengeance, and destruction threat. They fire his palace, while the flame ascends, they force his guards, and execute his friends. He cleaves the crowd, and favoured by the night, to Turnus, friendly court directs his flight. By just revenge the Tuscans set on fire, with arms, their king to punishment require. Their numerous troops, now mustered on the strand, my counsel shall submit to your command. Their navy swarms upon the coasts, they cry to hoist their anchors, but the gods deny. An ancient augur, skilled in future fate, with these foreboding words restrains their hate. Ye brave in arms, ye Lydian blood, the flower of Tuscan youth, and choice of all their power, whom just revenge against Mezentius arms, to seek your tyrant's death by lawful arms. Know this, no native of our land may lead this powerful people, seek a foreign head. Awed with these words, in camps they still abide, and wait with longing looks their promised guide. Tarchon, the Tuscan chief, to me has sent their crown, and every regal ornament. The people join their own with his desire, and all my conduct, as their king, require. But the chill blood that creeps within my veins, and age, and listless limbs unfit for pains, and a soul conscious of its own decay, have forced me to refuse imperial sway. My Pallas were more fit to mount the throne, and should, but he's a Sabine mother's son and half a native, but in you combine a manly vigour, and a foreign line. Where fate and smiling fortune show the way, pursue the ready path to sovereign sway. The staff of my declining days, my son, shall make your good or ill success his own. In fighting fields from you shall learn to dare, and serve the hard apprenticeship of war, your matchless courage and your conduct view, and early shall begin, admire and copy you. Besides, 200 horse he shall command, though few, a warlike and well-chosen band. These in my name are listed, and my son as many more has added in his own. Scarce had he said, Arcates and his guest, with downcast eyes, their silent grief expressed, who, short of succours, and in deep despair, shook at the dismal prospect of the war. But his bright mother, from a breaking cloud, to cheer her issue, thundered thrice aloud. Thrice forky lightning flashed along the sky, and Tyrrhene trumpets thrice were heard on high. Then, gazing up, repeated peals they hear, and, in a heaven serene, refulgent arms appear, reddening the skies and glittering all around. The tempered metals clash, and yield a silver sound. The rest stood trembling, struck with awe divine. Aeneas only, conscious to the sign, presaged the event, and joyful viewed above the accomplished promise of the Queen of Love. Then, to the Arcadian king, this prodigy, dismiss your fear, belongs alone to me. Heaven calls me to the war, the expected sign is given of promised aid, and arms divine. My goddess mother, whose indulgent care foresaw the dangers of the growing war, this omen gave, when bright Vulcanian arms, fated from force of steel by Stygian charms, suspended, shone on high. She then foreshowed approaching fights, and fields to float in blood. Turnus shall dearly pay for faith forsworn, and corps, and swords, and shields, on Tiber borne, shall choke his flood. Now sound the loud alarms, and Latian troops, prepare your perjured arms. He said, and rising from his homely throne, the solemn rites of Hercules begun, and on his altars waked the sleeping fires. Then cheerful to his household gods retires. There offers chosen sheep. The Arcadian king and Trojan youth the same oblations bring. Next, of his men and ships he makes review, draws out the best and ablest of the crew. Down with the falling stream the refuse run, to raise with joyful news his drooping son. Steeds are prepared to mount the Trojan band, who wait their leader to the Tyrrhene land. A sprightly courser, fairer than the rest, the king himself presents his royal guest. A lion's hide his back, and limbs enfold, precious with studded work, and paws of gold. Fame through the little city spreads aloud the intended march, amid the fearful crowd. The matrons beat their breasts, dissolve in tears, and double their devotion in their fears. The war at hand appears with more affright, and rises every moment to the sight. Then old Evander, with a close embrace, strained his departing friend, and tears overflow his face. Would heaven, said he, my strength and youth recall, such as I was beneath Praeneste's wall, then when I made the foremost foes retire, and set whole heaps of conquered shields on fire, when Herylus in single fight I slew, whom with 3 lives Feronia did endue. And thrice I sent him to the Stygian shore, till the last ebbing soul returned. No more such if I stood renewed, not these alarms nor death should rend me from my palace, arms nor proud Mezentius, thus unpunished, boast his rapes and murthers on the Tuscan coast. Ye gods and mighty Jove, in pity bring relief, and hear a father and a king. If fate and you reserve these eyes, to see my son return with peace and victory, if the loved boy shall bless his father's sight, if we shall meet again with more delight, then draw my life in length, let me sustain, in hopes of his embrace, the worst of pain. But if your hard decrees, which, I dread, have doomed to death his undeserving head, this very moment let me die, while hopes and fears in equal balance lie, while yet possessed of all his youthful charms, I strain him close within these aged arms. Before that fatal news my soul shall wound, he said, and swooning, sunk upon the ground. His servants bore him off, and softly laid his languished limbs upon his homely bed. The horsemen march, the gates are opened wide, Aeneas at their head, Achates by his side. Next these, the Trojan leaders rode along, Last follows in the rear the Arcadian throng. Young Pallas shone conspicuous over the rest. Gilded his arms, embroidered, was his vest. So from the seas, exerts his radiant head the star by whom the lights of heaven are led, shakes from his rosy locks the pearly dews, dispels the darkness, and the day renews. The trembling wives the walls and turrets crowd, and follow with their eyes the dusty cloud, which winds disperse by fits, and show from far the blaze of arms and shields and shining war. The troops, drawn up in beautiful array, over heathy plains pursue the ready way. Repeated peals of shouts are heard around. The neighing coursers answer to the sound, and shake with horny hoofs the solid ground. A greenwood shade, for long religion known, stands by the streams that wash the Tuscan town, encompassed round with gloomy hills above, which add a holy horror to the grove. The first inhabitants of Grecian blood, that sacred forest to Silvanus vowed, the guardian of their flocks and fields, and pay their due devotions on his annual day. Not far from hence, along the river's side, in tents secure, the Tuscan troops abide, by Tarchon led. Now, from a rising ground, Aeneas cast his wondering eyes around, and all the Tyrrhene army had in sight, stretched on the spacious plain from left to right. Thither his warlike train the Trojan led, refreshed his men, and wearied horses fed. Meantime the mother goddess, crowned with charms, breaks through the clouds and brings the fated arms. Within a winding vale she finds her son, on the cool river's banks, retired alone. She shows her heavenly form without disguise, and gives herself to his desiring eyes. Behold, she said, performed in every part, my promise made, and Vulcan's laboured art. Now seek, secure, the Latian enemy, and haughty Turnus to the field defy. She said, and having first her son embraced, the radiant arms beneath an oak she placed. Proud of the gift, he rolled his greedy sight around the work, and gazed with vast delight. He lifts, he turns, he poises, and admires the crested helm, that vomits radiant fires. His hands the fatal sword and corslet hold, one keen with tempered steel, one stiff with gold. Both ample, flaming both, and beamy bright, so shines a cloud, when edged with adverse light. He shakes the pointed spear, and longs to try the plated cuishes on his manly thigh. But most admires the shield's mysterious mould, and Roman triumphs rising on the gold. For these, embossed, the heavenly smith had wrought, not in the rolls of future fate untaught. The war's in order, and the race divine of warriors issuing from the Julian line. The cave of Mars was dressed with mossy greens. There, by the wolf, were laid the martial twins. Intrepid on her swelling dugs they hung. The foster dam lolled out her fawning tongue. They sucked secure, while, bending back her head, she licked their tender limbs, and formed them as they fed. Not far from thence, new Rome appears, with games projected for the rape of Sabine dames. The pit resounds with shrieks. A war succeeds, for breach of public faith, and unexampled deeds. Here for revenge the Sabine troops contend, the Romans there with arms the prey defend. Wearied with tedious war at length they cease, and both the kings and kingdoms plight the peace. The friendly chiefs before Jove's altar stand, both armed, with each a charger in his hand. A fatted sow for sacrifice is led, with imprecations on the perjured head. Near this the traitor Metius, stretched between 4 fiery steeds, is dragged along the green, by Tullus, doom. The brambles drink his blood, and his torn limbs are left the vulture's food. There poor sinner to Rome proud Tarquin brings, and would by force restore the banished kings. One tyrant for his fellow tyrant fights, the Roman youth assert their native rights. Before the town the Tuscan army lies, to win by famine, or by fraud surprise. Their king, half threatening, half disdaining stood, while Cocles broke the bridge, and stemmed the flood. The captive maids there tempt the raging tide, scaped from their chains, with Cloelia for their guide. High on a rock heroic Manlius stood, to guard the temple, and the temple's god. Then Rome was poor, and there you might behold the palace, thatched with straw, now roofed with gold. The silver goose before the shining gate there flew, and, by her cackle, saved the state. She told the Gauls, "Approach, the approaching Gauls, obscure in night, ascend, and seize the walls." The gold dissembled well their yellow hair, and golden chains on their white necks they wear. Gold are their vests, long alpine spears they wield, and their left arm sustains a length of shield. Hard by the leaping Salian priests advance, and naked through the streets the mad Luperci dance. In caps of wool, the targets dropped from heaven. Here modest matrons, in soft litters driven, to pay their vows in solemn pomp appear, and odorous gums in their chaste hands they bear. Far hence removed, the Stygian seats are seen, pains of the damned, and punished Catiline hung on a rock the traitor, and around the Furies, hissing from the nether ground. Apart from these, the happy souls he draws, and Cato's Holy Ghost dispensing laws. Betwixt the quarters flows a golden sea, but foaming surges there in silver play. The dancing dolphins with their tails divide the glittering waves and cut the precious tide. Amid the main, two mighty fleets engage their brazen beaks opposed with equal rage. Actium surveys the well-disputed prize. Leucate's watery plain with foamy billows fries. Young Caesar on the stern, in armour bright, here leads the Romans and their gods to fight. His beamy temples shoot their flames afar, and over his head is hung the Julian star. Agrippa seconds him with prosperous gales, and with propitious gods his foes assails. A naval crown, that binds his manly brows, the happy fortune of the fight foreshows. Ranged on the line opposed, Antonius brings barbarian aids, and troops of eastern kings, the Arabians near, and Bactrians from afar, of tongues discordant, and a mingled war, and rich in gaudy robes. Amidst the strife, his ill fate follows him, the Egyptian wife. Moving they fight, with oars and forky prows, the froth is gathered, and the water glows. It seems as if the Cyclades again were rooted up, and justled in the main, or floating mountains meet, such is the fierce encounter of the fleet. Fireballs are thrown, and pointed javelins fly, the fields of Neptune take a purple dye. The queen herself amidst the loud alarms with cymbals tossed her fainting soldiers warms, fool as she was, who had not yet divined her cruel fate, nor saw the snakes behind. Her country gods, the monsters of the sky, great Neptune, Pallas, and love's queen defy. The dog Anubis barks, but barks in vain, nor longer dares oppose the ethereal train. Mars in the middle of the shining shield is graved, and strides along the liquid field. The Dire sues from heaven with swift descent, and Discord dyed in blood, with garments rent, divides the Pries. Her steps Bellona treads, and shakes her iron rod above their heads. This scene Apollo, from his action height, pours down his arrows, at whose winged flight the trembling Indians and Egyptians yield, and soft Sabaeans quit the watery field. The fatal Nistrus hoists her silken sails, and shrinking from the fight, invokes the gales. Aghast she looks, and heaves her breast for breath, panting and pale with fear of future death. The god had figured her as driven along by winds and waves, and scudding through the throng. Just opposite, sad Nilus opens wide his arms and ample bosom to the tide, and spreads his mantle over the winding coast, in which he wraps his queen, and hides the flying host. The victor to the gods his thanks expressed, and Rome, triumphant, with his presence blessed. 300 temples in the town he placed, with spoils and altars every temple graced. 3 shining nights, and 3 succeeding days, the fields resound with shouts, the streets with praise, the domes with songs, the theatres with plays. All altars flame, before each altar lies, drenched in his gore, the destined sacrifice. Great Caesar sits sublime upon his throne, before Apollo's porch of Parian stone, accepts the presents vowed for victory, and hangs the monumental crowns on high. Vast crowds of vanquished nations march along, various in arms, in habit, and in tongue. Here Mulciber assigns the proper place for Carians, and the ungirt Numidian race, then ranks the Thracians in the second row, with Scythians, expert in the dart and bow. And here the tamed Euphrates humbly glides, and there the Rhine submits her swelling tides, and proud Araxes, whom no bridge could bind, the Danes, unconquered offspring, march behind, and Morini, the last of humankind. These figures, on the shield divinely wrought, by Vulcan laboured, and by Venus brought, with joy and wonder fill the hero's thought. Unknown the names, he yet admires the grace, and bears aloft the fame and fortune of his race.